Welcome to the TruthLover video podcast. I'm your host, Will Pye, author, speaker, coach, and retreat leader, and founder of Love and Truth Party. Love and Truth Party is a self-organizing, self-replicating community and movement of love and awakening, a wisdom school facilitating health, healing, and happiness. You can find out more about us and join our mailing list at loveandtruthparty.org. We exist to empower the deep realization and integration of unitive consciousness of one human being and to inspire action in the world from this clarity as New Earth Ninjas, our playful avatar. We do so in the spirit of play, holding the paradox that all is well, even and including all collective crises, whilst simultaneously being moved to act, to lessen suffering and serve the creation of conscious culture and society. Our projects include distributing 1 million love letters from the universe, inviting people to receive the love and care in these, and within the happiness hacks, including the 7 questions and other free resources found on loveandtruthparty.org. We believe that in giving, we receive, and we invite you to pay forward the value you receive in this podcast by sharing, liking, subscribing for more great content, leaving a review on iTunes, getting your love letters from the website, following us on social media, and supporting us at loveandtruthparty.org. I'm really happy to be joined today by a beautiful guest doing beautiful work in the world. Fritzi Horstman is the founder and executive director of Compassion Prison Project, a nonprofit dedicated to bringing compassion, humanity, awareness of childhood trauma, and creative inspiration and manifestation to the men and women living behind bars. Fritzi and a team of volunteers visit Kern Valley State Prison every 3 weeks and are witnessing transformation, self-forgiveness, and creative productivity in the 30 men they serve. Fritzi Horstman produced HBO's The Defiant Ones, directed by Allen Hughes, which premiered in 2017 and has garnered several awards, including a Grammy for Best Music Film, IDA Best Limited Series, and was nominated for 5 Emmy Awards, including Best Documentary. Her first feature, Take a Number, which she wrote, produced, and directed, debuted at the Slamdance Festival in 1997. Fritzi, it's a real pleasure to have you joining us today. How are you?
I'm so good, and thank you for that introduction. It's lovely. And we're serving 30 men. I just wanted to clarify. We're serving 30 men right now at Kern Valley State Prison, and tomorrow I venture into Lancaster State Prison, and we start there, and we're about to go into another Tehachapi, and hopefully a couple more in the next month. It's very exciting, and I can already feel what tomorrow is going to bring. We're allowed to bring our cameras in there, so we're going to start creating video content, which is phenomenal. So in addition to the 30, we got 30 more, and then 300,000 more, and then 3 million. Well, there's not 3 million in prison anymore, but there's many more people incarcerated in the world, so we'll keep going.
This is beautiful, and your title that you propose for our dialogue is Compassion in Action, which just feels very deeply aligned with what the Love and Truth Party more broadly is pointing to, and the Compassion Prison Project just seems to embody this in a really profound way. And I'm excited to hear that it's expanding. I've got a question to ask you. Like, in your bio there, people hear that you have had success in the world of showbiz as a producer and director and writer and more. And now there's Compassion Prison Project. I wonder if it might be interesting just to share a little bit of how one became the other. How did you get started in this serving people in prisons?
Well, I've always kind of been very concerned about how America treats African Americans. I've had my eye on this problem for probably 10 years, and after we won the Grammy, I kind of pivoted my focus to finding content about African Americans and their struggle to to emerge in the society. And I got invited to a prison, to visit a prison in a class called Hustle 2.0, created by Kat Hoke, this amazing woman who activates people. She activated me. She activates people and brings awareness to what's really going on inside prisons. I stepped in there and I cried for 7 hours, and I said, when are we coming back? And the structure of her program, she said 6 months, and that just didn't feel, that felt disconnected. For me, that felt disconnected because I was connecting with all these men and I wanted to continue to nurture them. And so I just said, I'm going to do something. I got to do something. And so during that time I was working and working in the film industry. I was producing a TV series, and the amount of work that takes, it's almost impossible to do anything else. And so I just decided, when this job is done, I'm going to devote my life to this, to the Compassion Prison Project. And what I've learned is every skill that I have learned as a producer, writer, and director, I am using every ounce of my talent doing the Compassion Prison Project, because I am basically producing and creating for these guys, and soon to be women as well. We are in production right now. We are creating calendars, we're creating podcasts, we're creating a film about childhood trauma. So the universe has given me all of this information so that I can give it right back to this project. So it feels so aligned and so on point. It's so weird. It's even the jobs that I was doing, I never used all these faculties, all my organizational skills, all my visionary skills, problem solving. It's just, and I'm so much more creative than I've ever been in my life. So it's such a gift.
I'm getting one of those sort of tingle up the spine moments, because what I'm hearing is that mysteriously you were in training, in preparation for this role without consciously knowing it. And I can relate to that in my own experience. It's like, oh wow, that stuff and those tasks and those skill sets that were being developed now in this purposeful work that I'm doing are really useful, and it feels as purposeful as any work could be. And I sense that in your communication, the alignment and the resonance.
Absolutely. It was 57 years of training, including the trauma that I received from my mother, even the abuse. That was training. Watching my father destroy himself, the depression, the shame that was living in my family, all prepared me for this day, right now, this conversation with you. It's and the work I do, and the work, I wake up dreaming about prison and how we, new ideas come practically every second now. And
there's two things there that just feel deeply profound. One is, one of the things I point to and teach is radical gratitude, which is this recognition that everything is functional, is purposeful in our spiritual evolution, in our collective evolution and growth. And you've spoken there, alluded to the pain and trauma that you went through, and its functionality in terms of teaching you, expanding consciousness in you, such that you're now in a position of information and wisdom to serve. And there's also something you touched on there, and in your bio, in the document we asked people to fill in for this show, we had this little thing saying extra information, any extra information, and you just put "there is no shame," and I just thought that was absolutely beautiful. So I can relate also to going deep into shame in order to know that there is no shame. So it feels like there's a bit of a biographical thread there in your life, and I'm wondering, like, when did you start to connect the dots as to work in the prison project, the work of bringing people to their inherent worth, bringing people to forgiveness, how did that unfold? Can you speak a little bit more to that personal connection in your own journey and now how you're serving?
I had coffee one morning with my friend Seth, who's a psychotherapist or a psychologist, and I told him about my childhood trauma. And nobody really wants to talk about their trauma. And, you know, I mean, all the shame, I had a lot of shame about it's funny, I had a lot of shame about my childhood trauma. And he said, oh, you need to read a book, The Body Keeps the Score. I don't know if you've ever heard of that book.
Yeah, for sure.
Bessel van der Kolk. And that reading that book changed my life. It was, I got to understand the person I became because of the trauma that I endured, and the shells and the anxiety and the depression that was kind of masking my true self, and just the awareness of what trauma does and how it, you know, your inability to learn, your inability to feel safe, the reactive patterns I had with my friends, all those things, they were just like, it was like a bright light of hope came through my body. And I had read that book, and soon thereafter I went into prison. And when I walked into prison, I thought, oh, this isn't a prison. This is a trauma center. And because I saw the trauma on every man that I looked at, and, you know, their shame, their trauma, their sense of worth was next to nothing. Just desperate to feel loved and seen. And I just saw myself in those men. So, you know, that gift of that book I started giving that book to everybody. I sent it to a few of the men that I met at prison, you know, but I'm realizing that book is really dense, and it's a big meal. So, you know, I don't think most of the guys didn't really respond to it. So you know, I've been doing other modalities to get them to see what their childhood did to their lives, and specifically their trauma. And it feels like there are two really extraordinarily, I'm using the word again, but I can't think of another word, profound threads intertwining here. One is, we're at a point scientifically where we're beginning to grasp more fully how trauma impacts neurological development and thus behavior and mental illness and so on. And there's this ancient story that America claims to be living and built on, which is the Christian story of forgiveness. And the prison system, as you've seen up close and personal, is pretty far from the model of Christ. It's pretty far from recognizing the innocence of all beings. It's pretty far from forgiveness. And what I'm hearing and sensing with the work that you're doing, you're bringing the wisdom, the modern science that is allowing us to actually understand psychologically and neurologically how and why an individual might behave in the way they behave or feel the way that they feel as a consequence of events that happened many, many, many years ago, potentially in lifetimes of their grandparents and so on, we also know now as well. And bringing in this, you know, it's not only Christian, of course, it's the golden rule, it's the timeless teachings of spiritual masters everywhere, of compassion, of forgiveness and love. And I'd love to hear how that's begun, like, to what extent has that flowed with prison authorities and the system, and to what extent have you found resistance to either one of the new science or the profound forgiveness of incarcerated human beings? Well, my experience has been limited. The prison that I'm in, that I've been working in, is it's called a Max 180, and it's the most restrictive, the most, they say the most violent people are centered in this facility. So the trauma on the guards, the correctional officers, is as if not more obvious than the men that I'm working with. The hypervigilance, their inability to allow any emotion into their being. What's very, very fantastic that just happened was Sam Harris. He has a website called Waking Up, an app called Waking Up, and a very, very well-renowned podcast. He just donated his app to every correctional officer in the state of California. And they'll be able to access that through our program. So we're so happy that Compassion Prison Project, I saw the need for they need some help. They've got PTSD. Everyone has PTSD. All the men in prison, everyone in prison has PTSD, basically. And I'm also working with some former vets, and we're also trying to draw comparisons about their PTSD versus the prisoners' PTSD. So it's a PTSD party, if you will, right now. But I'm really excited about. We need to. Compassion does not exclude the correctional officers. They're part of us too, and we want to bring all the resources we have that we're bringing to the men and the incarcerated men and women, also to the correctional officers, because it'll change everything.
Yeah, speaking of shame and how we cast roles in society, of course, we know the prisoner role is often cast as the judged one, the worthless one, the one who needs to be punished, and so on. And I've mentioned to you in another conversation, I was fortunate to attend yoga teacher training for prisoners in Oregon State maximum security prison. And one of the things I learned there is what you're pointing to, which is that the correctional officers are really regarded in the lowest when compared to other people doing very stressful, important work serving society, such as first responders in fire, in ambulance, and so on. And they're also, of course, in a maximum security prison, especially, have an additional element of stress and challenge in their jobs with that violent environment and the energy of the place and so on. And what comes to mind is the possibility of that role being recast, where then I imagine it would ultimately lead to a changed name. They're not correctional officers, but they're perhaps, with additional training and development, they're serving people in their development, in their spiritual journey, ultimately, in their trauma integration, in their freedom. And we do have prisons in the world, of course, more so in Scandinavia, where this is actually real. This is actually the way it's been done for years, that individuals are given the training to support people in their prison time, such that when they leave, there's very little chance, or very small chance, that they're going to be coming back. Whereas right now, the system is set up almost to ensure that people come back. Yes, they're
traumatized. They don't do anything to treat the trauma, and the trauma is the problem, because when you're traumatized, you don't feel safe, and so you are going to protect your body over any prefrontal cortex activity, which is, should I do this or not? Is this the right thing to do in this moment? There's no time. When you're traumatized, you act. And yes, and in Norway, I think it's 2 years. The people, the officers, or the people that work with the prisoners, they take 2 years to train. And here, I think we have a 6 to 8 week training. I don't know what CDCR does, but That's California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation. I don't know what they do, but I know it's not nearly 2 years. There's nothing close to 2 years. And you know, as we start shift, as we change the prison system, which is what's going to happen, and I believe it'll take 3 years, and this year will be the big year. This will be the year of complete change. I believe we need to go completely from punishment and traumatizing to wellness and wholeness. So my vision is bringing about wholeness centers, and if we start treating the trauma that exists right now in the prisons through group therapy, you know, talking about what's going on and letting these men and women feel safe for the first time in their lives, we will start healing, and those people will suddenly sprout this dormant seed that's been in them of ability and function and pro-social, they call it pro-social expression. And those are the neighbors we want. You know, and we don't want to, I mean, it's that circle that we were talking about before we started recording. When we're housing people, we're housing part of ourselves. We're not whole because there's a problem in our system. It's the same thing with the traumatized cops. You know, they're just as wigged out as the correctional officers. They go out there, they're worried about their lives, so they're not thinking, and that's the thing. And these modalities of restorative justice, instead of these arbitrary trials that have no involvement, where the victim and the offender don't really get to connect and find out what the harm is and how the harm can be repaired, instead of just these arbitrary sentences that put people away to keep us safer, but they don't, because those people who come back out are, you know, 60 to 70% likely to commit a crime within the first 3 years of their release. So I just said a lot. So.
There's a lot in that, and the cycle, breaking the cycle, bringing it down to the mechanics or the energetics of how humans interact, of how different neurologies connect, how different nervous systems connect. There was two things that came up as you were speaking to that richness. One was that the work of spiritual teaching or the work of leading groups very often is simply helping people bring their nervous system to balance, to peace. So it's a way where, you know, anxiety or grief or whatever wants to come up. I mean, this is in my view. I think there'll be a lot of others who maybe go for a more transcendental route, but the messiness, the pain can be seen, can be met, and can be loved. So essentially, yes, we're doing that work together. We're bringing our nervous systems to balance, and it's just like, oh wow, we're doing the same thing here in prison populations. Actually, just working with people to realize the presence of love, to realize that it's in this moment it's safe for this nervous system to exist, and the actual what that looks like in terms of connecting the victim of the crime and the individual that's committed the crime, to actually create that point of connection in a restorative justice process rather than a more punishment driven. Maybe you can speak a little bit more to that of where we're at with how we go about that process and where we might look to move to it a more enlightened, informed, wise justice system.
Well, I'll just speak. A couple of sessions ago, we had a restorative justice session in our class, and thank you for saying that thing about the groups and how it's a safe place to express yourself. I didn't even understand what I was doing. I just did it naturally. We all sat in a group, and that seemed to be what everybody wanted. And you know, we've heard such horrible tales in that group, and we've held each other as we're sharing them. And then kind of magically, one of the volunteers came in with the restorative justice. You know, he was assaulted, and what happened in that room when all the men got to really understand what their violence, the effect of their violence had on the victim, it rippled through the whole room, and the healing, their desire to heal the volunteer and the volunteer's desire to heal himself. And it was one of the most powerful days of my life, and for everybody there. And as far as restorative justice in the bigger picture, I don't really know what's going on. I do know that Danielle Sered, she wrote a book called Until We Reckon. It's an incredible book, and she really gets into the minutiae of restorative justice, what that looks like, why we need it, what happens, and how the people that commit crimes, when they are given this choice, their lives turn around, and the victims who basically, when they're victimized, they have all this trauma that is not resolved, and putting someone away for 20 years does not begin to address the trauma that they're dealing with. And they're frightened for their lives now. They're just as hypervigilant as the person who committed the crime now. So Danielle Sered talks about how one guy got assaulted, and what he wanted was for the person who assaulted him to be with him in this neighborhood where he would get assaulted. And I don't even remember the incident, but through the cooperation of the two, he healed his trauma and was able to function again. And I mean, those are the things that, I don't know if all the victims in the United States want the people who've committed the crimes to be treated in the way they're being treated, knowing that they're going to be worse than when they entered the prison. I mean, I don't know if you know what's going on in Mississippi, but it's like Dante's, I don't know what level of hell, but it is paradise lost in there. And we've got a lot of soul searching to do in this country, for sure.
What comes to mind as you're speaking to that, there was a reaction that happened after I had this experience up in Oregon and shared on my Facebook feed that there was this profound and beautiful experience. And though the group had committed a number of what would be regarded as the worst crimes that an individual can commit, what I found was a number of human beings very much like me, that had made mistakes, that had been hurt, that had hurted others. And there was a strong reaction from someone on the post. I forget the details, it was some time ago, but it was something like, I wonder how the people who were victims of their crimes feel about you connecting with them, or something like this. And it didn't make any sort of logical sense. But of course, what we're speaking about is illogical. It's not a frontal cortex process or decision. And so when we're speaking about the victims of brutal crimes, of rapes, of attacks, of bank robberies, of those that are left behind when someone has murdered someone, again, with the actual knowledge, with the perspective of the bigger picture of what's actually happening, I wonder how that might change and inform people's desires of what to happen next. Because generally we're presented with this very surface, narrow view that someone has done wrong, we need to punish them, as if that's somehow effective or solving a problem. or put them away to protect society or protect me. You know, if I'm the victim, that might be my primary concern, right? I don't want to be in the same threat that I was under when that person was out. But if we're looking at the bigger picture of what happens when they do eventually get out, or indeed the suffering that's perpetuated within the prison system with the guards, with the individuals within that prison system, it just feels like as that soul searching, as that conversation deepens and expands, as we see the bigger picture more, there's possibility for a less reactive conversation to develop about what is the best response for me as a victim. What would be the best response for me with that individual that has attacked me or caused me so much harm?
Yes, I mean, the victim, taking care of the victim, I think needs to be the priority in the situation. And, because we know the person who committed the crime is traumatized, that person may needs to go into care. He doesn't need to go into prison, he needs to go into care. And whether that be for one day or for 1 year, we don't know. But we do know that there has to be some kind of intervention so that this doesn't keep happening. I do not think, though, it should be a punitive intervention, and nor should it be any kind of isolation or solitary confinement or any kind of, punitive action. It's just, it creates a human being that's even worse. And when we consider the victim needs to restore his life from where he was or she was before the crime was committed. And, again, back to Daniel Sarah, that book is fantastic, but that's the concern, is how do we make you whole again? And basically crime is a signal that there's trauma. That's the signal. It's crime equals trauma. No one wants to commit a crime. They do it out of desperation. And, whatever that is, or it's, the brain has stopped functioning in a healthy way. So I don't think I just answered your question, but just the victim does need to be considered, need to be honored and made whole, and however that can happen. But I think connecting, if the victim is open to it, connecting with the person who committed the crime is probably the fastest way to make progress. There's an incredible, sorry, I'll just say one more thing. There's an incredible television series by Van Jones about restorative justice. It's an 8-part series on CNN. I highly recommend that.
That sounds powerful. I know I've heard stories within different models of justice where there is a connection facilitated between the victim and the person who's committed the crime. And whilst I guess what I'm hearing is that everyone needs to be taken better care of, and that includes the victim. So a justice system that is focused on wholeness, that is focused on trauma reduction, that's focused on care, compassion for all, that's a good starting point in terms of what would that look like with a trial where there is some sort of connection facilitated in an intelligent, protective way, such that the victim and the person who's committed the crime walk away with an enhanced experience, with a healing having happened. And of course, it may be that person that's committed the crime then has ongoing work to do with trained professionals to support them in a deeper process. But I know there are one or two stories come to mind. I know that in South Africa, in the Truth and Reconciliation Committee, there was a lot of rather more deeply wise and spiritually informed approaches to creating societal healing, and in Rwanda as well, in fact. So a couple of places in the world where you'd think the desire for revenge or the disconnection between tribes or between skin colors would be so pronounced and so strong. And yet within those systems, there are extraordinary occurrences. There's one that springs to mind of a woman whose son was killed by another man. And at the trial, she said that what she wanted was for the boy who had killed her boy to become her son. Mm. And what she wanted was for him to visit her a couple of times a month or whatever. And that was what was possible for her in that space, to see clearly, I would imagine, that this guy, what he did was not because he's evil or because he's a bad human being, but because he's a hurt boy, because he's traumatized, and because he was acting from that place. So the resolution is actually to love him more, not to punish him more. Which again is what the science is telling us, and it's what the teaching of Christianity, which is so prevalent in the US, is telling us, is it not? To forgive.
Yes, it's interesting with Christianity, though. There's also that conflicting original sin belief that we came in, basically we came in with shame. So there's kind of like, it's at war. Christianity is almost at war with itself, mm-hmm. in that there's a guilt, there's a fundamental belief that we're not whole, and so I've been grappling with it because, and the do unto others as you have do unto yourself. It's very interesting to me, this idea of punishment, knowing that it's possible my daughter or my son could go into the system, the criminal justice system. And how do I want my daughter or my son to be treated, or even myself? I mean, it's the do unto others is a very powerful rule. It's a cyclical thing. You smile and you almost automatically get a smile back. And so, as we torture and demean the people that commit crimes, we're doing that to ourselves as well. And all of us have just stood by and watched. That's what I've watched myself do. I watched all these atrocities happen, and that's why I no longer can do that. And to start planting seeds around the world that love is a choice and an option, and it's really about reclaiming ourselves. It's the prisoner is just a symbol of where we're at. That's all, I think.
I love what you're pointing to there, and I want us to call it out courageously, which is the lie and the falsehood of the nonsense of original sin. So one of the things that Love and Truth Party is about is really looking at the falsehoods of human narratives, the falsehoods of human stories, of human consciousness. And separation is the first one. The lie of separation. We now know scientifically that there is no such thing as separation, that we're all connected in one electromagnetic field or field of consciousness, depending upon one's perspective. And we know that materialism, both ethical and ontological, the idea that we're actually living in a primarily or solely physical world, are also false narratives, are untrue. And finally, our third little unholy trinity of myths or falsehoods, the idea of lack, the idea that there is not enough, or that I am not enough, which is shame or guilt, is simply untrue. And the truths we would contend would be unity. We are connected. We're connected with spirit, with our source. We're each one of us connected with God, if we use that word. We're immaterial beings ultimately, and we're enough. Each one of us as human beings is enough, and there's enough for all. And it feels like there's the energetic work of Compassion Prison Project, of sowing seeds. You use that expression, which is very much the love letters that we're sharing around the place, is to create a moment of truth, a moment of awakening in that moment where love is pointed to, where the reality of love is known, which can be facilitated in a group environment where a nervous system that is at peace and in love can share that. And the ripple thing, I just want to explore that a little bit more with you, because we touched on it prior to recording, and I feel that it's there's actually a solid scientific basis. It's also very deeply spiritual to recognize that a shift in an individual ripples out into the collective. And we were sort of talking about how we see that instantly. If we smile at someone, often it's an immediate smile back. So right. in that moment of choosing to connect with the cashier or the stranger passing us on the street, there's a connection. And when you spoke about the moment in the prison, when there was a sort of organically occurring moment of restorative justice with the guy that was assaulted, and that activated in my heart, that I felt that in my nervous system here now in this moment. So the idea of the rippling effect of acts of kindness or compassion is something we experience viscerally. We know it in our own nervous systems, in our own bodies. And I just get excited about the potential for that as more and more people are doing this work. And I think especially in places where the work is so needed, such as prisons.
Yes, that's one of the things that I'm bringing about. I call it massive volunteerism, which is, we need people going to all the prisons, and we need people that even feel that they need to be punished. We need those people to go in as well, because the people who feel that we need punishment do not see the prisoner. They do not have contact with the prisoner. And that's the thing. They have an idea of what this person is, and they don't have a reality. They're not based in reality. And creating connection of prisoners with the people that are incarcerated, with the people that are outside, will shift this dynamic, because we will see ourselves in there. And when we know that we're inside, we will want to change things. And it's amazing. I was at Costco, and I was talking to a woman about my project, and she said, "Oh, we should just put all the murderers on a desert island." And I said to her, I said, "Have you met a murderer?" I said, "I invite you to come with me to meet a murderer, because when you meet someone, your perceptions about crime and punishment will shift, will change, and you won't want to put them on a desert island." And I don't think she's going to take me up on the offer, but she did say, "Thank you for saying that, Fritz." She didn't say Fritzi, but thank you for saying that, because I challenged her, her gut reaction about something that it was a bad seed planted a long time ago. And these bad seeds just need to be unearthed so that we can replace them with good seeds, because the men in there are artists and poets and songwriters and musicians and fathers. They're exquisite. And I challenge anyone to tell me otherwise when they meet them. That's why we need volunteers.
Yeah, and that's a great call to action for anyone listening that's based in the US or has friends in the US who feel would like to get involved, to go to compassionprisonproject.org, and there's opportunity to connect via that platform to find out where people can join the movement and where they can volunteer.
Absolutely, and let's not limit it to the US. If someone in Australia wants to well, you're in Australia. Another person in Australia wants to create a compassion prison project there. This, I started it by walking into a prison. Anyone can walk into a prison. I don't know how each prison works, but if you walk into a prison and say you want to volunteer, if they say no, you write to your congressman or to your politicians, because let us in so we can help. We need to help. Yes, it is a call to action, compassion in action.
I'm excited at what will happen next as this grows. You spoke at the start of our call that it's quite an exciting time. You're right on the cusp of the second prison, and that the third is lined up. And I know that your vision is far grander than a couple of prisons or indeed one state. And here you're evoking beyond the shores of the US as well. And yeah, I know from I tend to take too much on that is possible for one person to do in a 24-hour day. And there is part of me that's sort of wondering, I wonder what might happen in the coming months as other projects finish. And, I am here in Australia, and having experienced the profundity of connecting with individuals in that context and serving people in that context, what I got from that was huge. I can still see very clearly one gentleman in particular. I think he'd been inside for over 15 years, and he had clearly put that time to good use. He'd clearly, in spite of the conditions not being supportive of it, done a lot of meditation. He was one of the, he sat there in the lotus position with sparkling eyes and open heart. And what struck me actually about the gathering, I was teaching, funnily enough, it's funny how life puts one in such circumstances, teaching radical gratitude. And I wasn't aware that it was a high security prison. My friend said, do you want to come along to a yoga teacher training with me? And I said, of course. And I just assumed it would be low or medium security. And literally as we were walking in, or as we walked through drove through the gates, it was like, oh, maximum security. Okay, interesting. And our group was every one of the worst possible crimes that you could imagine. And I did have a moment thinking, what am I going to teach or share with these gentlemen about radical gratitude, about being grateful for everything? Many of, if not all of these people are going to spend the rest of their lives in prison. And yet what I actually found was not a lack of receptivity or a resistance to this notion that everything had meaning, everything had potential for growth, but a total openness to that and a total embodied getting of that, far deeper than any satsang or spiritual group that I've connected with, because they had been compelled to find meaning and find a way of working something that's almost unworkable. Yes. Finding purpose in this environment. So even within that context, people were finding meaning and evolving and growing spiritually. So I can only imagine what will happen if we actually facilitated that, if we made that more overt, more explicit as the opportunity, if everyone was behind that same endeavor, from the governor of the prison to the correctional guards to the training of the correctional facility operators. And yeah, I just see this huge potential there.
And what happens is, this is just for the volunteers so they understand what you give in there, what you receive after you've left, when you walk out those doors after 7 hours. Well, we do 7 hours, but you can do 3 hours. The change in you is quantum. It can't be explained. The love and the gratitude that you receive from those men or those women is, it's transformative. And it's like a hidden secret. I don't know why everybody doesn't know this. I mean, I've been told that for years, but and all those little cliches, but it's true. You go in there and you don't even know what you're doing, and they're like, just thank you, and showing up and seeing them for who they really are is all you really need to do. And if you know how to write songs, even better. But it doesn't matter. Just go in there and just be. That's all they want. We bring treats. We bring treats, and we bring massive love, and we get massive love, and a lot of drawings. A lot of the guys are just drawing for us, and I mean, I don't know. It's like kindergarten. Your kid comes home with a drawing for you, and they want to show it to you, and they just want to be seen. They want to be seen, just like we want to be seen, and they see you. Goes around and around, and when the correctional officers start shifting, there's so much magic available in those halls.
Yeah, it's interesting, the body language. You were doing this, it goes around, and it really does. This is, again, the joy of giving we talk about at Love and Truth Party. And one of my favorite prayers that I used in meditation for many years is the prayer of St. Francis. And there's this line in there where he says, in giving we receive. And what I hear you pointing to is that's very much the experience when you serve in this way. This volunteering in prisons is actually something that you serve others, you give, and in so doing you receive in a beautiful way.
100-fold. You receive 100-fold, and it changes your life. I call them sacred gates because it's like walking into a temple of our own humanity, and it's on display for everyone to see. I
want to just quote that. So as creative beings, right, as agents of evolution upon planet Earth right now, what you're doing is you are walking into prison facilities as temples of humanity, and allowing these moments of transformation and connection for everyone to see, right? So the correctional staff, the volunteers, yourself, the inmates, the prisoners, or whatever the appropriate term is, all get to witness this transformation of one human being seeing another, witnessing another.
Yes, that's basically like the prescription for life. Is every child wants to be seen, every man and woman wants to be seen, and we go to outrageous, it's amazing what we do to be seen, and it never gets filled, it seems. I've been trying to be seen all my life, and I'm finally realizing I need to just see myself, and that'll work. And yet, now going into prison, just remembering their names and looking them in the eyes and having a joke for them or something. They're seeing me and I'm seeing them, and I'm good. I'm finally good. And but I've done my own work too, so it helps to do your own work as well. But I think people that are drawn instinctively to visit a prison knows there's something in there for them. And the ones that aren't instinctively, there is still something in there for them. It's because this is part of ourselves. And, just like the homeless person on the street, when you walk by them, you're not acknowledging the part of you that is an addict, the part of you that can't get their shit together on a day, or can't take care of themselves, or wants to crawl and not deal. I mean, that's the homeless person that we're ignoring. So the same with the prison person, or the cop that you hate because you think they're going to see you as a criminal or see you as less than. all the people that we avoid or we despise are just things of ourselves. Obviously, this is an old teaching, but the prison is a big one because we don't want to look at our traumatized selves. That's really what, and that's the same with homeless. It's the same thing. So, when you see a homeless person, that's an opportunity to get in touch with your own trauma and your own shadow self, which is the only way we can bring light to that. So come to prison.
And what else is Compassion Prison Project in need of? So obviously there's this opportunity for people to join and to become volunteers. I know from my experience, I know from the experience of many friends who have connected with Compassion Prison Project, that it's life-changing to take on that opportunity to become a volunteer. What else are you looking to manifest? Are you looking to receive to support the next phases of Compassion Prison Project's expansion into the world?
Well, our yearly nut is about $600,000 now. I'm sure it will be more as we enter more prisons. So donations are great. And even just volunteering for the office, or just, you can work remotely. There's tons of things to transcribe and to organize and, post things on social media, just all those things that need, it's a machine that needs to be fed. And I seem to be the sole feeder right now, or not the sole, but the primary feeder of the machine. So those kind of volunteering hours, if you can't spend a day at prison, if you want to just donate some time, and also activating communities and, students and people, and your gifts. What are your gifts? If you're a writer and you want to teach a class, or if you have even if you have a class that you can't teach and you have a curriculum or something, we need, there's I'm going to stick with the United States for right now, but there's 2.3 million people in prison. There's 1,719 prisons in the United States. That's not even including jails and juvenile facilities and Native American facilities. So there is a huge need just to show up. That's really what I envision. But we need to bring our gifts. If we're teachers, if we're psychotherapists, whatever, 4 days a week, 4 days a month, or 1 day a month, just showing up is just transformative for everybody. And it'll soften all these walls. And what else we need? We need connections, and we need people, influencers. If there's an influential person that can tweet about this or post a photo on Instagram, all those things really make a difference. And corporate sponsorship and like donations of granola bars. We spend half of our money is spent just bringing treats to the guys, or a van, if you want to donate a van so we can schlep back and forth for hours, or, gas cards, or, it doesn't matter. Just whatever's inspiring, because that's it. When love is infused with the donation, whatever that is, it's contributing to the shift. So, even if or a letter to, one of those random love letters. Oh my God. If we could get 2.3 million random love letters, I don't know how that would work, but we'll figure that out. Let's do 2.3 million letters. I have a post office box. I'll start sending them out. And I know, and those guys, one of the things they really want to do, it's called SAM, Spreading Awareness to Minors, and they want to write letters to the kids in juvenile hall so that they can start giving them advice. So they want to share their wisdom. So those guys they're actively figuring out ways to change the world from their perspective. So, they want to write letters as well. So you know, we can get everybody in prison writing letters too. You know, let's, you know, there's 2.3, and they've got time. They've got a lot of time to write a lot of letters. So however we want to do that, but it's just, and create initiatives, just like it's the most creative thing you can do, because nobody knows what they're doing in there. The prisons do not know how to deal with this. So it's really up to us. We have to rehabilitate our society. This is a symbolic act, but we know there's a problem and we need to rehabilitate. So start in the darkest place, shine the light in the darkest place, and we'll all be glowing.
I really want to just reflect my appreciation that sometimes you ask someone, how can I support you, or what do you need for help? And they maybe struggle to have clarity on, but you were the absolute opposite. You gave us massive clarity and a very, very long list of all of the possible ways that we can support the Compassion Prison Project, which is excellent. I can see the genius in your producing capacities there. So I encourage everyone listening, watching, to check out compassionateprisonproject.org, and we'll have all those details in the on all the different platforms we're sharing today. Fritzi, you inspire me. This is my start of the day here in Australia, and it's a great start to the day. I'm looking forward to staying connected and seeing what other ways we can support the work of Compassion Prison Project in the world. It's really profound and inspirational for me.
Yes, thank you. And you're so inspiring and so clear and perceptive. And this is the beginning of 2020. And, you know, 2020 means clarity. I mean, it has like it's a fundamental definition of clarity. So there is no mistake that this is the year of clarity and focus, because we know the right path, and now we must walk it. And you know, thank you for allowing me to share this time with you and talk about these things that are so dear to my heart and so dear, soon will be dear to all of your hearts, because they're our brothers and sisters. We cannot deny that, and to deny that is to deny ourselves. So it's very easy.
Beautifully put. Thank you for joining us today, Fritzi. I wish you so much wellness and joy with the project, and look forward to supporting you in that.
Thank you so much. Thank you for this.
And thank you everyone watching and listening today. Thank you for your support, your attention, and you can connect with compassionprisonproject.org. You can also connect with Love and Truth Party on loveandtruthparty.org. We invite you to take love letters, to volunteer in prisons, to share, subscribe, and like this podcast. Your comments and interaction, of course, help this interaction come to more people's eyes and ears. Thank you to all of our existing supporters and contributors. Together we are creating kind, conscious, courageous human community.